Is the anti-squat line method really the only way to tune a ladder bar or four-link car? Absolutely not. Today I want to cover the percentage of rise method that can help you in addition to or in place of using an anti-squat line. Let's get started. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. Your support and watching my videos and going through that is a huge way of supporting our channel, so thank you for doing that. Please leave a comment. I enjoy reading every comment. I try to respond to every comment, so hit the thumbs up button, please. Please leave a comment. Let's jump into the percentage of rise method. What I have drawn out here is some information around. Let's look at this as your slick. This is the center line, so this would be your axle center line. A lot of shops use the percentage of rise method. This became very popular mainly with ladder bars, because a ladder bar has one mount point to the chassis, whereas four link has two chassis mounts, and you have a lot more adjustability with a four link. That doesn't necessarily make the four link better. It just means you have more ways to tune, that is, get in trouble. When you're talking about the percentage of rise method, there's a couple points that are really critical to understand about your car. And I have another video that I've done in the past around four-link bar angles that will be very helpful for you to watch, whether you're a ladder bar or four-link car, in determining your center of gravity and where that center of gravity is in relation to the center line of your rear axle. Those are very important calculations for you to make. This means having access to four corner scales, or at least the front and rear weight of your drag car, will be very important. Ideally, a four corner scale system, you can do a lot of good calculations. Like I said, I have videos that talk about how to find the instant center of gravity and what does the instant center mean, what does the center of gravity mean, the height of the center of gravity, how far in front the axle your center of gravity is located. So for today's purposes, these are numbers that I've made up for this demonstration only. I will say this is pretty close to the numbers on the 48 Ford, but there's a few differences that I made just for the purpose of this video. Let's cover what these points mean. The very first thing I want you to understand is, in this drawing, the center of gravity is 60 inches in front of the rear axle center line. So this vertical line that you see right here is 60 inches in front of the center line of the rear axle. My center of gravity height in this example is 24 inches off the ground. A lot of guys will take the time to find the exact height of the center of gravity. Once again, I have videos that cover all this. If you look in the description, I will link those videos so that you can easily find them. In this example though, we're saying the center of gravity is 24 inches off the ground, which is pretty close to what the 48 Ford is. The 48 Ford has a pretty high center of gravity. We have a lot of weight high up in the 48 Ford. And that's just the way it is. I mean, that car is a challenge to get tuned on the launch. So we have a 24-inch high center of gravity from the ground. This is 0. This mark right here is 12 inches. That is 50% of the center of gravity height. So that's all this mark is representing, is 50% of the center of gravity height. So we have 60 inches forward, and we have 24 inches high is our center of gravity. Let's say this is a 29-inch slick. Let's just go with that for right now. And usually a 29-inch slick is not going to be 29 inches in diameter because we don't pump them up all the way. But this could easily be 27 inches, 26 and a half, 27 inches from the ground to the top of the slick. So that would, you could easily find your center line of the axle. What is not drawn here is your ladder bar or your four-link bars. And I didn't want to make this drawing too convoluted or too messy, so I left those drawings out. However, what is represented in this drawing is two different instant center points. One is 39 inches in front of the axle, and one is 52 inches in front of the axle. And that is critical in using the percentage of rise method for understanding how much hit you are putting into the rear end of your drag car. What do I mean by hit? I am talking about how hard are you planting that slick. How much physics is involved planting the slick to the track. Whether you're using rear separation or rear squat. I don't want to get into that debate right now. Both rear squat and rear separation, you can make a slick car go. I'm not going to debate that. However, in this example, I want to make sure you understand what the percentage of ride method means in relation to how hard you are planting the slick or how much bite you're taking away from the slick. Let's explain what these lines mean. Whenever you graph this out, and I will have some web links in the description of the sites I actually use to do this, and I will demonstrate how to graph this using free software on the internet. I will do that towards the end of the video. So if you are interested in learning how to graph these lines very simply, I will go over that at the end of the video using free software in your browser. That's all you need is an internet connection and a browser, and you can graph your car out if you know these points. And there's also software that can help you find your instant center location. I'll link that in the description as well. Let's look at the 39-inch instant center example first. So what this means is, if you haven't watched the other videos yet, the instant center for a ladder bar is where the ladder bar mounts to the chassis. How far forward and how far off the ground is the instant center. And in this example, I've marked it here. So here's the height, and here's the distance from the rear center line that this instant center finds. What you want to do is you want to know where your center of gravity is, how far out and how high, and you want to draw a vertical line from the ground up through your center of gravity. Then if you draw a line from the center of the slick through that intersect point and carry it out to where it intersects this vertical line, you can then calculate your percentage of rise on this setting. Now, I don't want to start splitting hairs on is this 60, 65%, or 70%. I want to focus, I don't want to keep this simple. Let's focus on the 50% mark. In this first example with a 39-inch instant center, if you project the line out from the contact part of the slick where it's on the ground, the center, and you project a line through your instant center all the way through this center of gravity line, you are above 50% in this example. The higher up the center of gravity line you go, the more bite, the harder you are planting the rear slick. So as you come up this line, the leave and the reaction to the slick is going to become harder, faster, and more violent. Second example, I've got an instant center of 52 inches and it's further in front, and if you draw a line through the center of the slick through that contact path, you see we fall below the 50% mark of the percentage of rise. This could be 45%, it could be 40%, I don't care right now. What I want to demonstrate is how you use the percentage of rise based on your center of gravity height, your center of gravity location in front of the front axle, and then where does your percentage of rise fall on this line. As you come down that line and get below 50%, you are taking violence and hit and quickness away from how hard you're slamming the slick into the track. So obviously in this example, I'm still talking about rear end separation. Let's talk about what I mean by that. This is pretty critical to understand. the anti-squat, the 100% anti-squat line, it is not 100% accurate. What I mean by that is, when your instant center, let's say in this equation, I would technically be drawing a line from here through to the center of gravity height to the front spindle as my intersect point. What you will find when you're using the anti-squat line, 100% anti-squat line method or anti-squat method, if your instant center is behind your center of gravity, I don't care if it's below the anti-squat line or not, the tendency is going to be to have rear end separation. I have proven through the years that if this mark is 90% of the anti-squat line, so it's 10% below the 100% anti-squat line, even though it's below the anti-squat line, with its short distance from the rear end and with its how far it is behind the center of gravity, the less the wheel stand on the initial hit, but it's still going to have some rear end separation. There's a whole nother video coming on that. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. The main thing to understand right here is these are two examples, very real examples, that could exist for a 4-link car. You can still use the percentage of rise for a 4-link method if you project out and you know where your instant center is. Like I said, this became very popular with the ladder bar cars, and this method absolutely works with ladder bars. Let's take an example. If this 39-inch was a ladder bar car, if we move the ladder bar down to this line, then we are moving down the percentage of rise. The percentage of rise is decreasing in relation to our center of gravity height. And if we move this 39 inches down to here on that bottom line, then we would be taking out rear end separation. We would be calming how hard we're crushing the slick with a ladder bar car. If we move the ladder bar up in the chassis and we increase and we bring the center of percentage of rise up to here, we are going to crush the slick even harder if we move the mount point of the ladder bar up on the chassis. That's why when people weld these brackets on and set up a drag car, if this chassis bracket is not in relationship with the rear end housing brackets and you get these angles crazy off just because you have a contact point on the chassis, you need to understand the relationship in these bar angles and what's happening with the bar angles, not just the percentage of rise math. Getting the entire combination honed out and lined up for your car and your center of gravity is critical. I work with probably 45 to 50 to 60 customers over the last year since I've been doing these videos who have ladder bar cars, but the chassis mount in relation to the ride height and the rear end mounts and the center of gravity is greatly off, and you can only tune that so much unless you start cutting and welding and changing stuff out, which normally means your ladder bars have to be remade. However, at a high level, if you're making a lot of horsepower, and today's world, what I mean by a lot of horsepower and torque, I'm talking 1,000, 1,200 horsepower or higher, and you're around 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, and you're running a slick, you have to be extremely careful with the horsepower and the potential we have at our hands today with trans brakes and clutch cars. Now that's important. If you are a clutch car and you're dumping the clutch, which hits the rear end about as hard as you can hit. Now our automatic transmissions and our converters and our trans brakes these days can hit a rear end just as hard, in my opinion, as a manual, as a stick shift car. But if you think about a stick shift car, you generally want to be a little less than 50%. If you are seriously dumping the clutch on that car at the starting line at 4,500 or 4,000 RPMs or higher, and you're just popping that suspension as hard as you can, then you may want to consider less than 50% on the percentage of rise method, especially if you're above 1,000 horsepower or 1,000 foot-pound of torque. I'm working with a customer right now who has a 29-inch slick, and they are running a pretty high percentage of rise right now with a 4-link car, and they are nearly putting the wheels down on the track. They are crushing the slick that hard. When you have a situation like that, you have to start bringing your intersect point down on that percentage of rise method, and you probably want to lengthen it some as well. Remember, we've talked about this before. The closer your instant center gets to the rear end of the car, so the shorter your instant center is, the more violent and the quicker the hit is going to be whenever you hit that rear end. As you lengthen your instant center, it's still going to hit the rear end, but you're going to start tuning some of that hit out. So a shorter instant center hits hard, fast, but it also releases its energy sooner than a longer instant center does. So if you hit initially and have bite, and then as you start carrying out closer to the 60-foot line, you start to spin, it could be you have too short of an instant center. Now, listen, there are hundreds, thousands of factors at play with that scenario I just said. You can't just shorten or lengthen your instant center without looking at the entire combination. So as you have the horsepower levels we have today, and as you have all that available to you on the starting line today, you need to be thinking more about the balance of how all this works. The angles of your 4-link bars are important. That's a whole nother video. I want to probably do a part 2 on 4-link bar angles, including ladder bar angle. If you are running a ladder bar, it is absolutely critical what that bottom bar angle is. That's the only bar you have that attaches to the chassis. So if your main ladder bar is pointing down versus level versus uphill, it changes the physics that are in play. Because as you hit the rear end and you try to drive that car, that rear tire forward, these angles will impact squat or separation. Absolutely. It will impact if you're trying to suck the rear end up into the fender well, push the rear end down towards the track, or kind of balance neither and put more energy driving the car forward. So these bar angles are absolutely critical in understanding how those bar angles react to your instant center, percentage of rise, or anti-squat line method. I don't care what method you use. These angles are important. And when I'm working with customers that have very extreme angles with slicks, now with a radial car, yes, you're going to have some pretty extreme angles going on. We know that. But 90% of my customers are running slicks. And when you start having very extreme bar angles with slicks, I'm going to consciously bring you back to a safer baseline where I'm putting more energy pushing your vehicle forward while still planting the slick for traction. Those are all very important things to understand. Alright, so here's the percentage of rise method. Let's pause now, and for those of you who want to hang around, I'm going to show you how to use the internet and some free software to figure this stuff out and plot it on a graphing so you can see exactly where your plots fall. Let's jump into that now. Let's use this website as our first website to walk through this. And this is the BaselineSuspensions.com site, but this is a great website for determining your instant center location, your length, and your height. So let's jump into this, and I have two different scenarios. So here's the first scenario that shows an anti-squat value of 75.51% with an instant center length of 53.44 and a height of 8.75. You take this same setup and come over here, and we've got some different bar angles. We got an uphill rake on the bottom bar. We got more of a downhill rake on the top bar for an instant center length of 38.68 and a height of 10.66. Let's use the percentage of rise method to understand what this instant center change between these two examples on the same vehicle. Let's see what kind of a difference it makes whenever we graph this out. So here's some important things to understand. We're going to use X and Y coordinates to graph this out. This is not difficult. Please hang with me. These are free tools. You don't have to be a mathematician to do this. So let's start off and let's take this first point right here and graph where this point would fall if we started at 0. If 0 is the center line of the axle where the slick meets the road, we will call that 0, 0. And then this point will be 53.44 for my X and 8.75 for my Y. Let's do that. So here's a tool on the internet called Slope Calculator. And like I said, all of this will be in the description of my video. But what I want to do is I want to graph the slope of that line right here from the center of the slick to the center of this point, and I want to carry it through my center of gravity line right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say my first X value is 0. My first Y value is 0 because we're starting at the center line of the axle and we're starting where the slick is on the road. So 0, 0. We're going to go out 53.44 inches and up 8.75. So I'm going to put, for my second X, I'm going to put 53.44, and for my second Y, I'm going to put 8.75. 8.75. And then I'm going to calculate. And the part I'm interested in is this part right here, Y equals. So I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to copy it. Now the second internet site is Desmos.com calculator. This is an amazing site for graphing slopes, lines, etc. What I've done is I've taken the liberty to fill out 3 red lines. We know our instant center height in the example on the chalkboard was 24 inches. So this top red line is 24 inches. If you click on it, you'll see it's 0 and 24. We know the half, 50% of rise is 12. So this line is at 12 inches. And then I know in my example on the board, we said the center of gravity was 60 inches in front of the rear axle. So we got 60-inch line right here. To represent a horizontal line, you do Y equals and the number. So these two are horizontal lines from Y equals, whatever the number needs to be. So my center of gravity height was 24. So I say Y equals 24, and it draws me a line from infinity to infinity at 24 inches from 0. 12, and I know I'm 60 inches in front of the axle center line for my center of gravity length. So here is 60 inches in front of the axle at 24 inches high. Those are just set lines. Now, to show the slope of the line we just created, I copied it to the clipboard. I'm now going to paste that into here and hit the enter key. Now here is the slope from the center of the slick where it meets the ground to where it goes through my percentage of rise line right here. And as you can see, it crosses the line at 60 and 9.824, which is below the 50% line of 12 inches. Let's go look at this example. In this example, we got some different bar angles. And we got a lot shorter instant center length and a little taller instant center height. Let's see what the slope of that line would do. So we come back to our slope calculator. We're going to start off with 0, 0, and then for my x, my second x value is going to be 36.68. 36.68. And my second y value is going to be 10.66. 10.66. And then I'm going to calculate. And I'm interested in y equals. I'm interested in the equation of that line, which is my y equals whatever that number is. So I copy that to the clipboard. Then I come back to the graphing calculator, come down here, I paste that line in and hit enter. Now, I have a purple line and a black line, and you can see the difference between the two on the percentage of rise. This one crosses at 9.9. This one crosses at 17.437. If I highlight that mark and click, they will leave those two values on the graphing screen. With this two sites, I can visually see different scenarios with how my instant center length and height will intersect the center of gravity line and understand the percentage of rise that I have. Between these two scenarios, this top scenario, which is this picture right here, if we have a slick and we have 1,000 horsepower or 1,000 foot-pound of torque and we're dumping the clutch, or we have a trans brake and a 5,000 stall converter and we hit that rear end, and this is a slick car, more than likely you're going to crush these slicks and your wheel is going to come very close to touching the track. This is going to be a pretty hard hitting slick car. Now if you take power out and you're bringing boost in very slow over 1 or 1.5 seconds, that's very different than what I'm dealing with a blower, roots blower setup, where it just crushes that slick right off the hit if I'm not pulling timing and all that stuff. This line, this purple line, is going to be a lot easier on the slick than this top line. You can see we're below the 50% line. A lot of guys will ask you, what is your percentage of rise? So let's calculate that. Let's take a calculator. We know that our center of gravity is 24 inches. We can see that right here. So let's leave that on the screen. So what is the percentage of rise of 17.43 on 24 inches? So you type in 17.437 divided by 24 equals that times 100. We are at 72.65, so call that 73% rise. That is a lot of rise for a slick car. If I was running a radial car, I might have more rise in it than that, depending on what my chassis is doing and what's going on with all of my pieces that make up my recipe. So what's the percentage of rise on this value? Well, let's find out. 9.824 divided by 24 times 100 equals 40.93. Call that 41% percentage of rise. These tools, the slope calculator tool and this graphing tool, are amazing at creating visual images of what your car is doing in relation to the center of gravity, height, and distance from the rear end. These are very cool numbers, and when you start visualizing this and you can see a picture of it, you can come in here and start doing some pretty cool stuff. For instance, let's say I wanted to take this setup right here and I wanted to change the bottom bar angle and I wanted to go 7.75. Calculate instant center. Look at what just happened. I'm getting closer to the anti-squat line. So how would that graph out on this? I'm just kind of curious. What's the scenario look like? So 41.87 and 10.01. So 41.87, 10.01. Is that correct? 41.87, 10.01. 41.87, 10.01. I calculate that out. I come down here and I grab the value of y, copy that to the clipboard. I come over here to a new line, paste it, hit enter. Now I can see this center one. I can change the color of this line by hitting that little gear. I can come down here and make this one orange. Say done. So here's my third example. I can see the difference of what's going in to my percentage of rise method. This percentage of rise is 14.34. So it's still over 50%, but a lot less than 17.43, but more than 9.824. Guys, this is some cool stuff. I hope this helps you understand how you can go and graph your car yourself without buying some expensive piece of software or some very complicated Excel spreadsheet. This is very good information that you can use to make educated decisions on your car. You can make a change, visually see what's going on in that change. Go out and test, take video, then come back, look at the video, look at your 60-foot time, see how the car is reacting. Now you can come in here and see visually what's going on. Hopefully the percentage of rise method gives you yet another tool to put in your tool belt when it comes to tuning rear drag car suspensions. This is a very cool method. I hope you stay tuned and watched how to use the internet and some very cool free tools to do this graphing. So a physical picture is so much more than just words and writing and drawing this stuff out. I can tell you this, Dad and I have used welder's chalk and levels, and we've drawn this out on the concrete floor of our shops before and just used some long flat edges to draw these lines, and it makes a huge difference when you take the time to see what this looks like in a picture. Thank you so much for spending time with me on the percentage of rise. We have some very cool things that we're going to be showing you on the 48 Ford. We are going to be upgrading our center section to a different center section from Strange Engineering with the bigger carrier bearings and a 40 spline spool. Today we're at 33 splines on the axles and the spool. We're going to be upgrading to 40 spline axles and 40 spline spools. We've got the rear end completely out of the car. We're going to use this as an opportunity to make sure we're being safe, that we don't twist an axle or destroy an axle with how heavy the 48 Ford is at almost 3,500 pounds and around 1,100, 1,200 horsepower and 1,000 foot-pounds of torque in that thing. We want to make sure that we're not doing anything stupid with an axle that's not going to hold that kind of weight and horsepower. Also, we've made some 4-link changes on the 48 to calm down the wheelie. And it's a very crucial bottom bar change that we're making that I want to share with you. And then between the anti-roll bar video and the bottom 4-link bar change with a top bar change, but mainly the big change I want to focus on is the bottom bar location. I want to show you how we're going to take some wheelie out of the car and get more momentum of the 48 Ford going down the track and less of it yanking the front end in the air and spinning and wasting energy doing that motion. Just remember, we're trying to accomplish 3 things. We want to go fast, we want to go straight, and we want to be safe.